Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Dr. Kaivalya T. Desai, and I am a faculty at Department of Social Work and Assam University, Silchar. Today, the module that we are going to discuss is Ideology of Postmodernism. Following are the objectives of this module: to develop an understanding of the influence of postmodernism on nature of social work practice. Second, to develop an in-depth understanding of different strands of social work practice based on radical humanist approach. And finally, to understand the limitations of postmodernism. Some of the key things that have been discussed in this module include postmodernism, deconstruction, multiculturalism, radical humanism, and identity. Before we discuss how ideology of postmodernism has come to influence social work, uh, I would state just a couple of points about what basically we mean by postmodernism. In postmodern society, the unidimensional nature of traditional social politics has been challenged by identity politics with a particularistic or fractured definition of inequality. This has created a crisis for the welfare state that in turn has generated a crisis for social work. Therefore, the postmodernists reject the grand narratives such as humanism, Marxism, as they assume that these are essentialist and totalitarian theories. Rather, they are influenced by the ideas of French structuralism, particularly the ideas of thinkers such as Derrida, Foucault, etc. Largely, their focus is on discourses and social constructs. The ideology of postmodernism emerged from the womb of ideology of critical theory. Critical theory has both structural and post-structural perspectives in it, and the ideology of postmodernism largely emerged from the post-structural perspective within critical theory. However, as the ideology of critical theory was predominantly biased towards a structural analysis of the society based on class relations, therefore, those who prescribed the idea of pluralism within the framework of sociology of radical change began developing postmodernism as an independent ideology. These social workers who believe in the sociology of radical change from a non materialist or subjective viewpoint are labeled as the raisers of consciousness. The mixture here is one of humanism and politics. Now, the basic idea is that you cannot have one unique explanation of how of the society. There are so it believes in plurality. There's no one reality. There are multiple realities, and therefore, ideology of postmodernism tries to focus more on identity politics. So here one can also argue that identity, trying to locate communities based on identities and not just geographical boundaries. The radical humanists, who are also known as the raisers of consciousness, see the individual creating the world in which he or she lives. However, for radical humanists, this world is a fraught place full of inequities. The nature of society and the state of individuals' consciousness are critically related. So basically, the context in which an individual lives influences his or her consciousness. Many of the problems people experience personally, psychologically, and socially can only be understood in terms of the dehumanizing characteristics of modern society. Let us take an example here of one social problem, let's say domestic violence. With domestic violence, that too, let's look at particularly domestic violence which happens uh, in the marginalized and the poor households. Uh, now there's a structural reason which is associated with it. The dehumanizing conditions under which probably a poor worker works leads him to resorting to alcohol to, let's say, ease out his nerves. And eventually, when there is a complaint from within the family, the person resorts to domestic violence. Now, is his consciousness just related uh, to this to is like it's basically he's resorting to such an issue, to domestic violence, probably because he or she is frustrated at work. Now, at the same time, there's another reason that within that household also, class or poverty is not the only variable of analysis. It's also the gender aspect. It's assumed that uh, the man can uh, be violent with his wife. So that's why many of the problems, the point that I'm trying to make is that many of the problems people experience personally, psychologically, and socially can be only understood in terms of the dehumanizing characteristics of modern society. Uh, in a nutshell, the ideology of postmodernism advocates for recognition and empowerment of multiple cultures through a political ideology which is rooted in identity. Thus, there are different strands of radical humanist practice that emerged from the ideology of postmodernism that argue and take action against discrimination on grounds of race, gender, disability. In case of India, the idea of caste also comes up in a big way. Uh, Also, the idea of age. So they would look at each of these categories and the identities that they carry, and then try to look at how individuals who are part of these different social categories experience discrimination, and how this discrimination is influenced by the context. Together, these can be grouped under the broad umbrellas of anti-discriminatory practice and anti-oppressive practice. Now, let us try to discuss the nature of practice that social work practice that ideology of postmodernism entails. Now, usually it is assumed that if an individual is unfulfilled in his or her work or estranged within the family, it is assumed that he or she has some problem. And if the individual, let's say, is estranged in the family and becomes abusive, then there's a major problem with that individual only. However, uh, the ideology of postmodernism assumes that there is a political cause of these personal problems, as these individuals might be feeling alienated both in terms of their work as well as their social lives. Moreover, they feel no identity with the social institutions that have a significant bearing on their lives. Thus, defining the problem of clients requires understanding of the extent and depth to which they are oppressed both materially and ideologically. Whenever one group has the power to define the situation of another, the effect on the members of the subordinate group can be assessed in terms of the climate of control set by the dominant and powerful group. Now, here one of the basic examples that we can look at is, let's say, how we tell women in the society to dress up. Are they objects? Are we looking at women as a category? Are we trying to objectify women? Are we trying to dictate to them what to wear, what not to wear? So that's why and basically probably the men or the males have the power to define the situation of females. The methods by which dominant groups determine behavioral expectation and standards therefore need to be identified. The analysis of circumstances that involve the people of subordinate groups must take as its starting point the relationship between the personal situation and the social context in which it is set. The analysis must be sensitive to the state of mind of the individual and the social, political, and ideological climate in which that state of mind occurs. People have to become free and they need to reclaim their own subjectivities. The aim is to recognize how others define us to suit their interests. The production of critical awareness is known as consciousness raising. They must learn to recognize how others shape their experience of themselves. They must recover control over their own experiences and personal destiny. So, basically, right from the time when a child is born, the the you start this there is a process of socialization that goes on, and over a period of time, you know that individual internalizes his or her roles. uh, so the individual stops challenging, why am I expected to do this or that? Now this is something uh, which leads individuals into a state of false consciousness, especially when individuals are facing problems. They need to be the social workers need to actually build a sort of emancipatory potential in them. They need to uh, they need the requirement is to break this false consciousness by engaging with them in a dialogue. Now uh, they must learn to recognize how others shape their experience of themselves, how they are being perceived by others. uh, they need to recognize that there might be discrimination in that there might be oppression in that. So that's the idea of consciousness raising, that your experience is being shaped by the society. In addition, the aim is for groups to seek control over the services and resources made available to meet their condition. Rather than exist as passive recipients of expert practices, clients should become active producers as well as consumers of resources defined under their direction. So again, the participation of these individuals is as important as the role of the social worker here. So when you're engaging, probably their experiences, they sharing their experiences and trying to locate their own problems is equally important. In order to achieve these aims, consciousness raising can be practiced both at individual and group level. The clients can begin to recognize how their own state of mind is linked to the values and demands of the wider society. Once they gain self-understanding, they might experience a growing sense of personal responsibility, freedom, and power. Critical consciousness is concerned then with challenging the given categories of thought with which people order their social world and think about themselves, and is eventually a strategy for cognitive renewal, an approach to reappropriating a consciousness which has been hijacked by systems if meaning which are alien to the individual's quest for an acute grasp of the reality. In other words, rather than social worker controlling the situation, clients should understand their own needs, define their own problems, and determine their own answers. Thus, in Freire's style, clients and social workers alike should reflect on their condition, then act on it, and in so doing, transform it. Mutual aid and self discovery are encouraged in this paradigm. Professionalism and social distance between helper and helped are reduced to the minimum. Cooperative, non-hierarchical forms of work, problem solving, and domestic life are fostered. Social workers are encouraged to seek strengths from tackling issues collectively, as feminists have done. One way is the development through grassroots unionization of a power base to challenge social deprivation and oppressive public policies. Another important theme which needs to be discussed alongside postmodernism and social work practice is the theme of multiculturalism. So let us discuss let us very briefly discuss some of the features of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is an issue that transcends politics, social theory, and professional practice. It represents a wide range of ideas that are not easy to define. Quite simply, in terms of social theory, multiculturalism means a double focus on equality and distinctiveness. Social work practice that recognizes plurality and multiculturalism involves the task of developing a critical theory of recognition, one which identifies and defends only those versions of cultural politics of difference that can be coherently combined with the social politics of equality. Finally, such practice assumes that a transformative politics of recognition that deconstructs group identities when combined with a transformative politics of redistribution based on the principle of socialist solidarity can blur and destabilize group differences, helping to redress forms of recognition. Having discussed the basic elements of practice based on the ideology of postmodernism, now let us delineate some of the major approaches that emanate from the ideology of postmodernism. One such approach is anti-racist social work. Racism occurs at three distinct spheres, namely personal, institutional, and cultural. Personal racism includes individual prejudice and activities that deny a certain group of people their dignity. Institutional racism is due to unjust public policies and pathologizing. Cultural racism occurs every day through language, religion, skin color, etc. One of the most basic examples of cultural racism one can look at is all these advertisements of fairness creams that we come across. Anti-racist social work emerged to counter racism at all three levels. It is a political commitment to eradicate oppression. Anti-racist social work can be practiced by organizing following steps. First, resisting to and countering racism, then eradicating racist social relations, tackling racist practices at personal and collective levels, forging partnership and alliances with like-minded global organizations, questioning how and why a profession dedicated to people's well-being oppresses black people, promoting human rights and citizenship-based practices. Another strand of social work practice based on ideology of postmodernism is feminist social work. The 1970s represented the renaissance of the women's movement, which in an earlier era struggled for universal suffrage. Quickly, the study of gender issues became popular across the Western world. Alongside, there was spontaneous emergence of women's groups in villages, towns, and cities across the globe that were concerned with issues as diverse as equal opportunities, domestic violence, rape, abortion, and health. Out of these groups emerged campaigns and initiatives for women empowerment, as well as a sense of solidarity in the face of oppression. Throughout feminist social work, there is an insistence that women learn to recover control over their own lives. This affects every aspect of practice. Feminist social workers use the feminist theory to guide their practice. They believe that the division of women's lives into public and private domain is the main problem. That's why the phrase personal is political. They question the functionalists on their status quo approach while handling abuse and violence against women. Feminist social workers convert private troubles into public issues, thereby deconstructing the category of women. The emphasis is on strength-based practice, which lays emphasis on taking action consistent with empowerment of self. Then another strand of social work practice that has emerged at a macro level is the disability movement. Cultural images reflect either the tragic or heroic dimensions of disability. Both are profoundly disempowering to disabled people, highlighting that definition is not a semantic issue but a political one. According to Oliver, the social theory of disability must be located within the experience of disabled people themselves and their attempts not only to define disability but also to construct a political movement among themselves and to develop services commensurate with their own self-defined needs. Thus, independence is a core issue that defines the status of disabled people. The politicization of disability is associated with the emergence of disability movement. At the center of disability movement's ideology is a social model. This has driven disabled people on the streets to protest against discrimination and to demand equal citizenship. This social model defines both the philosophy and the strategy of disabled people. Empowerment through self-advocacy has been the guiding strategy of the disability movement, involving campaigning for equal rights and against eugenic policies and the use of inhuman weapons. Overall, the disability movement has sought to change the political landscape by focusing its attention on issues as diverse as civil rights, the social model, independent living, the benefits system, and positive disability imagery. Now, the disability movement, the anti-racist social work practice, the feminist social work, these are all global practices. But there is one very particular strand of social work practice based on ideology of postmodernism, which is extremely relevant in Indian context, which is anti-caste social work. Caste-based discrimination and exclusion is practiced in economic, civil, cultural, and political spheres in India. For example, exclusion is practiced in labor market, agricultural land market, use of public services like roads, temples, water bodies, and institutions delivering services such as health, education, etc., as well as participation in decision-making process. To counter caste-based exclusion and discrimination, some social workers have come together to develop anti-caste social work model. It is a politico-theoretical position that rejects the structure of graded inequality based on the idea of purity and pollution closely linked to caste and descent. Moreover, it is argued that anti-caste social work is a celebration of the strength and resilience of the Dalit, also known as the scheduled caste community, in which standing years of oppression and discrimination and using strengths to reconceptualize helping professions that would further the process of empowerment. Anti-caste social work is also about, also about trying to look at the idea of social capital. One may argue that now we have policy frameworks which do not discriminate between a higher caste and a scheduled caste, but one has to look at the idea of social capital, and this becomes extremely relevant as we move to further remote areas in the country, rural areas in the country. But that does not mean that the idea of caste-based discrimination is not prevalent in urban areas. It is equally prevalent there. And one of the basic examples of how still caste perpetuates in India or exists is that I always would ask all the students to pick up the matrimonial section and flip across the section and see that caste still prevails in India. And therefore caste-based discrimination also still prevails in India, and anti-caste social work has emerged in India to counter such discrimination and empower the scheduled caste community. Now let us look at some of the criticisms and limitations of postmodernism and social work. One criticism that postmodernists receive is that although it deconstructs different social, cultural, and political aspects with extreme vigor, it fails to construct a unique alternative vision of a just and equal society. David Ho sees social work as the product of modernity. and attempts to bring about which attempts to bring about a pleasing quality of life and a just society by using the insights of social services. Postmodernity has accordingly shattered the basis of social work within the welfare state. Outside the welfare state, social work has had to wrestle with the postmodern reality of uncertainty, fragmentation, and polarization. So basically, what Ho argues is that, you know, along with deconstruction, alternative construction is important. And how many multiple realities one would you fragment? Uh, can you fragment into, and then how will you possibly build the idea of a unique, just and equal society? So let us now just wrap up, or let us now just summarize this module. What we basically discussed is the the ideology of postmodernism, and how the idea of identity is centric to it, how it looks at multiple social realities. Then what we've tried to look at is the major. We've also tried to juxtapose it with the idea of multiculturalism, and then we've tried to look at different strands of uh, social work practice which have emerged based on the ideology of postmodernism, and then we looked at a couple of criticisms to it. One of them, one of the most predominant ones which exists is that one of the most predominant critiques is that, you know, it fragments social reality into so many it looks at so many multiple realities at one time, that and deconstructs it, that it is unable to offer an alternative, unique construction uh, to the society. Thank you.